The shuttle pulled away, leaving me standing in the freezing Denver wind with my luggage scattered around my feet. Brandon's words still echoed in my mind as I watched the vehicle disappear into the distance. "Figure it out yourself, Rachel. Maybe this will teach you to respect family decisions." What he didn't know was that in exactly 47 minutes, I would be boarding my own hypersonic aircraft while he sat cramped in coach, completely unaware that his wife of 6 years had just become his biggest nightmare. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But let me back up, because what happened next was years in the making, and the look on his face when my jet pulled up to the private terminal was worth every moment of humiliation I'd endured. My name is Rachel Thompson Walsh, though I'm about to drop that last part permanently. 6 years ago, I was Dr. Rachel Thompson, a aerospace engineering consultant who'd spent the better part of a decade revolutionizing private aviation technology. I'd earned my PhD from MIT at 25, patents under my name before 30, and had quietly built a consulting firm that worked with the most exclusive aircraft manufacturers in the world. My specialty was hypersonic flight systems, the kind of technology that could get you from Denver to London in under 3 hours. That's how I met Brandon Walsh at a technology conference in San Francisco. He wasn't there for the engineering panels, of course. The Walsh family had diversified their real estate empire into luxury travel experiences, and Brandon was scouting cutting-edge transportation options for their high-end client, tall, confident, with the kind of easy smile that came from never having to worry about money. He approached me after my presentation on next-generation aircraft propulsion systems. "Incredible work, Dr. Thompson," he said, extending his hand with that practiced charm. "I'm Brandon Walsh, from Walsh Luxury Resorts. We're always looking for ways to elevate our guests' experiences, and what you're describing could revolutionize how our clients travel between properties." What started as a business conversation over coffee extended into dinner, then a weekend in Napa Valley, then regular flights between Denver and San Francisco. As our relationship deepened, Brandon was fascinated by my work, or at least he seemed to be. He'd ask detailed questions about my projects, marvel at the technical specifications, and encourage me to share my biggest dreams about the future of aviation. The Walsh family owned luxury ski resorts in Aspen, Jackson Hole, and Whistler, along with exclusive properties in Napa Valley and the Swiss Alps. Their wealth wasn't old money aristocracy, but rather the aggressive capitalism of land development and hospitality empires built over 2 generations. Brandon's grandfather had started with a single ski lodge in Aspen in the 1960s, and his father had expanded globally. Now Brandon and his siblings managed different aspects of the business, while their mother, Diane Walsh, maintained iron control over the family's public image and strategic decisions. When Brandon first brought me to meet his family at their Aspen compound, the red flags were subtle, but present. Diane Walsh was a formidable woman in her early 60s, with silver hair styled in a perfect bob, and the kind of understated elegance that screamed expensive. She welcomed me warmly enough, but there was something calculating in her assessment. "Aerospace engineering," she mused over dinner on their panoramic terrace, overlooking the mountains. "How fascinating. And you work with private aircraft. That could be quite useful for our business operations." Brandon's sister Kristen was more direct in her evaluation. "So you basically fix rich people's toys for a living?" she asked with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "That must be interesting work." His brother Tyler was polite, but distant, clearly more interested in discussing ski conditions and real estate acquisitions than my career. Throughout that first weekend, I noticed how conversations shifted when I spoke about my work. They were interested in the applications for their business, but the technical aspects that excited me seemed to glaze their eyes over. The engagement came 18 months later. During a helicopter tour of the Swiss Alps, Brandon had planned the proposal perfectly, landing on a private glacier with champagne and a 3-carat diamond ring that had belonged to his grandmother. The setting was breathtaking, the gesture romantic, and I said yes despite the small voice in my head that wondered if he was proposing to Dr. Rachel Thompson, the brilliant engineer, or to Rachel, the useful addition to the Walsh business empire. The wedding was everything Diane Walsh had envisioned for her eldest son, a winter wonderland celebration at their Aspen property with 200 of their closest friends and business associates. I contributed significantly to the costs, despite the Walsh family's wealth, because I wanted to feel like an equal partner rather than a charity case. My own family was much smaller and more modest. My parents, both retired teachers from suburban Chicago who were slightly overwhelmed by the entire affair. During the planning process, I learned more about the Walsh family dynamic. Diane ruled the family business with strategic precision, and while Brandon held an executive title, most major decisions required her approval. Kristen managed the marketing and guest experience aspects of their properties, while Tyler handled acquisitions and development. They operated as a unit, presenting a unified front to the outside world, while maintaining complex internal hierarchies. What I didn't initially understand was how much my technical expertise had become integrated into their business planning. During our engagement, Brandon frequently asked me to consult on aircraft purchases for the company, evaluate potential partnerships with private jet services, and even design custom flight experiences for their most exclusive guests. I was happy to help, seeing it as a way to contribute to our shared future. The problems began gradually after the wedding. Business conversations that had once felt collaborative became more direct. Instead of asking for my professional opinion, Brandon would present decisions that had already been made and expect me to implement them. When I suggested improvements or alternatives, I was told that the family had already considered and rejected those options. More troubling was how credit for my contributions began to disappear. A revolutionary fuel efficiency system I'd designed for their private fleet was presented to investors as a Walsh innovation. Technical specifications I'd developed for their custom aircraft were rebranded under the company name, without acknowledgement of my role. When I raised these concerns with Brandon, he dismissed them as minor oversights. "Your family now, Rachel," he'd say with that easy smile. "What's good for Walsh Resorts is good for all of us. Besides, you don't want to seem petty about credit when everyone knows how valuable you are to the operation." But I wasn't feeling valuable. I was feeling used. The pattern accelerated over the following year. My consulting firm, Thompson Aerospace Solutions, had thrived before my marriage, with contracts from major manufacturers and private clients worldwide. After joining the Walsh family, I found myself spending more and more time on their projects, and less time developing my own business. They never explicitly asked me to reduce my outside work, but there was always another urgent Walsh project that needed my attention. Meanwhile, my access to family decision-making remained limited despite my contribution. Strategic planning meetings happened without me, major purchases were made without consulting my expertise, and when I questioned these exclusions, I was told that spouses didn't typically participate in operational decisions. Yet Kristen's husband Tyler was somehow always included in these discussions, as was Tyler's wife Amanda, who worked in their marketing department. The most painful aspect was watching my professional identity slowly erode. At industry conferences, I was increasingly introduced as Brandon Walsh's wife rather than Dr. Rachel Thompson. My own achievements were footnoted as interesting hobbies rather than serious professional accomplishments. When I won a prestigious engineering award for innovation in sustainable aviation technology, the local newspaper's coverage focused more on my connection to the Walsh family than on the technical breakthrough itself. Brandon seemed oblivious to my growing frustration, or perhaps he simply chose not to see it. When I tried to discuss feeling marginalized in both the family business and our social circle, he'd remind me of all the advantages that came with being a Walsh. The beautiful homes, the exclusive travel, the connections that could benefit my career if I just learned to leverage them properly. "You're thinking too small, Rachel," he'd say during these conversations. "Instead of fighting for individual recognition, think about what we can build together as a family." The Walsh name opens doors that Dr. Thompson never could. What he didn't know was that Dr. Thompson had been building something extraordinary behind those. 3 years into our marriage, I made a decision that would ultimately save my career and my self-respect. Using the connections and capital I'd built before joining the Walsh family, I quietly began developing my most ambitious project yet, a hypersonic aircraft capable of commercial passenger flight. The technology was revolutionary, potentially cutting international flight times by 70% while using sustainable fuel systems. I structured the project through a shell company, Horizon Aerospace Dynamics, with funding from international investors who understood the value of my patents and expertise. The Walsh family knew nothing about it. To them, I was simply continuing my consulting work while contributing to their business operations. They had no idea that I was simultaneously developing technology that would make their private jet services obsolete. The work consumed my evenings and weekends for 2 years. While Brandon attended family business meetings and social events, I was in my home office designing propulsion systems and coordinating with manufacturing partners across 3 continents. The secrecy was necessary because I'd learned that the Walsh family had a pattern of appropriating and rebranding innovations they encountered, and I refused to let my life's work become another Walsh innovation. As Horizon Aerospace Dynamics progressed toward its first operational aircraft, my relationship with the Walsh family continued to deteriorate. They'd grown comfortable treating me as a technical resource rather than a family member, and I'd grown tired of pretending that their patronizing attitudes were acceptable. The breaking point began with a family ski trip to their Swiss property, planned for the week between Christmas and New Year's. It was meant to be a celebration of another successful year for Walsh Resorts, combined with planning sessions for their expansion into sustainable luxury travel. As usual, I was expected to provide technical consulting while being excluded from actual decision-making. 2 days before our scheduled departure, I received word that the first Horizon Aerospace aircraft had completed its final test flights successfully. After years of development, I now owned the world's first commercially viable hypersonic passenger aircraft. The feeling was indescribable: vindication, excitement, and a profound sense of accomplishment that I hadn't experienced since before my marriage. I should have been celebrating with my husband, sharing this incredible achievement with the person who was supposed to be my partner. Instead, I found myself sitting alone in our Denver penthouse, staring at the test flight data and realizing that Brandon would probably see my success as a threat to his family's business rather than something to celebrate. That evening, over dinner at one of our usual upscale restaurants, I decided to test my theory. I have some exciting news about a project I've been working on, I began carefully, watching Brandon's expression. He looked up from his phone, giving me the kind of polite attention he'd reserve for a business acquaintance. Oh, something for the resort properties? Actually, it's independent work. Remember when I mentioned developing next-generation aircraft technology? Well, it's finally ready for commercial application. His interest sharpened, but not in the way I'd hoped. Commercial application. Rachel, you know we need to be careful about outside projects that might compete with Walsh interests. What exactly are we talking about here? The we was telling. Even my independent work was somehow subject to Walsh family approval. Hypersonic passenger aircraft, I said, choosing my words carefully, capable of cutting international flight times by 70%. Brandon's expression shifted from polite interest to calculation. That could be incredibly valuable for our client services. Have you discussed licensing the technology through Walsh Resorts? We have the infrastructure and client base to maximize something like this. And there it was. Not congratulations on my achievement, not excitement about my breakthrough, but immediately strategizing how the Walsh family could profit from my work. It's my technology, Brandon. I developed it independently, funded it independently. His smile became strained. Of course, but we're married, we're partners. Surely you can see how this could benefit both of us if we approach it strategically. I could see exactly how it would benefit him, and exactly how it would cost me. Just like every other contribution I'd made to the Walsh Empire, my revolutionary aircraft technology would become another family asset, while I remained a technical consultant with a fancy title. I think I'll handle this project myself, I said quietly. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Brandon, clearly frustrated by my unwillingness to immediately fold my achievement into the family business portfolio. Over the following 2 days, as we prepared for the Switzerland trip, his attitude grew increasingly cold. Phone calls were answered in another room, business discussions excluded me entirely, and when I asked about travel arrangements, I was told that everything was handled. The morning of our departure, December 28th, I should have paid more attention to the detail. Brandon had insisted on arranging all travel logistics, saying it would be easier to coordinate with the family's schedule. I assumed we'd be flying on one of their private jets, as we usually did for international trips. Instead, Brandon informed me that morning that we'd be taking a commercial flight to save costs, since the trip was being treated as a business expense rather than personal travel. The shuttle will pick you up at 10, he said, checking his phone rather than looking at. I'm riding with Tyler and Amanda since we have some business to discuss en route. It was unusual but not unprecedented. The Walsh family often conducted business during travel, and I'd grown accustomed to being excluded from those conversations. I packed my bags, including my laptop with the final Horizon Aerospace documentation, and waited for the airport shuttle service that Brandon had arranged. At exactly 10 o'clock, a standard airport shuttle van pulled up to our building. The driver helped me load my luggage and confirmed our destination, Denver International Airport, United Airlines departure terminal. As we drove through the city, I reviewed the Switzerland's itinerary on my phone and noticed something odd. Our flight was listed as departing from the main terminal, but the Walsh family typically flew from the private aviation section of the airport. When I called Brandon to clarify, his response was curt: "Plans changed. We're flying commercial today. Just meet us at the gate." The shuttle dropped me at the United Airlines departure area at 11:30 for our 1:15 flight. I checked my bags, went through security, and headed to gate B27 as instructed. That's where I waited for 45 minutes, calling Brandon repeatedly and getting voicemail before approaching the gate agent to confirm our flight details. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the agent said after checking her system. "I don't see any Walsh reservations on flight 20. My blood went cold. I called Brandon again, and this time he answered. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "On the plane, obviously. Where are you?" "At gate B27, where you told me to meet you. The gate agent says there are no Walsh reservations on this flight." There was a pause, then Brandon's voice came back with an edge I'd never heard before. "Rachel, I told you to handle your own travel arrangements. The family discussed it and decided you needed to learn to manage these things independently." "What are you talking about? You said you were handling everything." "I said everything was handled for family members. You've made it clear that you prefer to operate independently, so we thought this would be a good opportunity for you to practice." The cruelty was breathtaking. They'd deliberately excluded me from their travel plans as some kind of lesson in family loyalty. "Brandon, our marriage is legally a family relationship, even if your mother doesn't approve of me." "Marriage is a legal contract, Rachel. Family is something deep. Maybe when you understand the difference, we can discuss your place in Walsh Resort's operations." I stood in the busy terminal, travelers rushing past me with their holiday plans, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. This wasn't about travel arrangements, or business discussions, or even their disapproval of my independent work. This was about power, control, and their systematic campaign to reduce me to a dependent resource, rather than an equal partner. "So what exactly are you suggesting I do?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "Figure it out yourself, Rachel. Maybe this will teach you to respect family decisions." The line went dead. I stood there for several minutes, absorbing the full scope of their calculated cruelty. They'd planned this deliberate abandonment as punishment for refusing to immediately surrender my aircraft technology to their control. They wanted me to scramble for last-minute commercial flights, pay premium prices for accommodation, and arrive in Switzerland grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion they might offer. What they didn't know was that Dr. Rachel Thompson had contingency plans that Miss Rachel Walsh had never needed to mention. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. "Marcus, it's Rachel Thompson. I need to make a call about our aircraft." Marcus Chen answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that familiar mix of precision and warmth that had made him one of the most sought-after aerospace project managers in the industry. We'd worked together on 3 major aircraft development projects before I'd gotten married, and he'd been quietly coordinating the international manufacturing aspects of Horizon Aerospace Dynamics for the past 2 years. "Rachel, perfect timing. I was just reviewing the final certification documents for the prototype. Everything's cleared for operational flights as of this morning." "That's exactly what I was hoping to hear," I said, finding a quieter corner of the terminal near a window overlooking the tarmac. I need to ask you something that might sound unusual. How quickly could we have the aircraft ready for a transatlantic flight? There was a brief pause. Are we talking about a test flight or an actual passenger transport? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Passenger transport. One passenger, specifically, and I need it today. Marcus knew me well enough not to question the urgency in my voice. The aircraft is currently at our facility in Boulder, about 30 minutes from Denver International. If you're serious about this, I can have the flight crew prepared within 2 hours. But Rachel, you understand this would be the aircraft's first official passenger flight. I'm very serious, Marcus. And yes, I'm fully aware of what this represents. Destination: Swiss Alps, specifically, the private airfield at St. Moritz. Another pause, longer this time. That's approximately 6,000 miles. With our current fuel efficiency ratings, we're looking at a flight time of roughly 2 hours and 40 minutes, including approach and landing protocols. 2 hours and 40 minutes to travel a distance that would take Brandon and his family 8 hours on their commercial flight, assuming they'd even managed to secure last-minute seats after deliberately excluding me from their original reservations. Can you send a car to pick me up at DIA? Terminal entrance, passenger pickup area. Already arranging it. Black Tesla Model S, license plate HZN001, should be there in 20 minutes. Rachel, are you all right? This seems like more than just a travel change. Marcus had always been perceptive, which made him an excellent project manager and an even better friend. Let's just say I'm about to test more than just our aircraft's capabilities today. Understood. I'll have everything ready. The pilot crew is Sarah Kim and James Rodriguez, both former military with extensive experience in experimental aircraft. You'll be in the best possible hands. After ending the call, I stood in the terminal watching the steady stream of commercial aircraft taxiing and departing, each one bound for destinations that would take hours to reach. In less than 3 hours, I would be in Switzerland while Brandon and his family were still somewhere over the Atlantic, assuming they'd even managed to secure alternative flights. The next 20 minutes passed with crystalline clarity. I retrieved my checked luggage, telling the United Airlines customer service representative that my travel plans had changed. They were surprisingly accommodating, perhaps because I remained calm and polite rather than demanding or emotional. The refund would be processed within 5 business days. As I wheeled my luggage toward the passenger pickup area, my phone buzzed with a text message from Kristen Walsh. Hope you managed to find a flight. Mom says there might be space at the lodge if you can make it to Switzerland by New Year's. Family rate, of course. The condescension was breathtaking. They'd orchestrated my abandonment, and were now offering me the privilege of paying to join them at their family property, as if their manipulation was actually a favor. I deleted the message without responding. The Tesla pulled up precisely on schedule, its sleek black exterior reflecting the winter sunlight. The driver was a young woman in a professional blazer who helped me load my luggage without unnecessary conversation. As we left the airport and headed toward Boulder, I used the drive time to make additional arrangements. First, I called the Culm Hotel in St. Moritz, where I'd stayed twice before on business trips. Their concierge service was legendary, and I'd maintained a relationship with them specifically for situations requiring discretion and efficiency. Dr. Thompson, what a pleasure to hear from you, came the familiar voice of Henry, the head concierge. How may we assist you today? I need accommodation beginning tonight, potentially extending through the New Year period. Also, I'll be arriving via private aircraft at the St. Moritz airfield around 7 local time. Of course, we have the Engadin suite available, with helicopter transfer from the airfield if that would be convenient. Perfect. Also, Henry, I may need assistance with some local arrangements over the next few days. Nothing illegal or unethical, but potentially requiring discretion. Henry's tone didn't change. Naturally, Dr. Thompson, discretion is always our priority. The second call was to my attorney in Denver, Patricia Hawkins, who specialized in intellectual property and corporate law. Patricia had helped me structure Horizon Aerospace Dynamics to protect my innovations from potential appropriation, and she'd been preparing for the possibility that my marriage might complicate ownership issues. Rachel, I was hoping you'd call today. I've been reviewing the documentation we discussed, and everything is in order regarding your independent ownership of all aerospace technologies and related patents. That's exactly what I needed to confirm. Patricia, hypothetically speaking, if my husband's family attempted to claim partnership rights to my innovations based on our marriage, what would be our legal position? Hypothetically, their position would be extremely weak. You developed the technology using independent funding, the work was completed using your premarital expertise and connections, and all intellectual property is properly registered under your individual name and your separately owned corporation. Colorado's marital property laws wouldn't apply to assets that are demonstrably separate property. And if they attempted to pressure me into sharing technology by threatening the marriage itself, that would potentially constitute coercion, which would actually strengthen your legal position if you chose to pursue separation proceedings. Rachel, are you anticipating problems? I'm anticipating clarity. Thank you, Patricia. I may need more specific advice over the next few days. I'll be available. And Rachel, be careful. The third call was personal. I dialed my parents in Chicago, knowing they'd be preparing for their own New Year's Eve plans. Sweetheart, my mother's voice was warm with surprise. I thought you'd be somewhere over the Atlantic by now. How's the flight? Actually, Mom, there's been a change of plans. I'm not traveling with Brandon and his family after all. The tone shift was immediate. Oh honey, what happened? Are you all right? My parents had always been supportive of my marriage, but they'd also noticed the gradual changes in my demeanor over the past few years. My mother, in particular, had gently questioned whether the Walsh family truly appreciated my accomplishments. I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually. I'm about to take the first passenger flight on the aircraft I've been developing, the one I told you about. Your hypersonic project. Rachel, that's incredible, but why aren't you traveling with Brandon? It's complicated, but the short version is that his family decided I needed to learn independence by arranging my own travel to Switzerland, so I am. My father's voice came through the speaker as my mother put the call on hands. Are you telling us that you're flying to Europe in your own experimental aircraft because your husband left you stranded at the airport? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Dad. There was a moment of silence. Then my father's laughter filled the car. Rachel, Elizabeth Thompson, you are your mother's daughter. Show them what you're made of. Frank, my mother scolded, but she was laughing too. Though I have to say, honey, I'm proud of you for not letting them diminish your achievements. Thanks, Mom. I'll call you when I land. Please do. And Rachel, take pictures. I want to see the look on Brandon's face when you arrive before he does. As we approached the Boulder facility, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. Through the Tesla's windows, I could see the Horizon Aerospace Dynamics hangar, a modest building that housed technology more advanced than anything the Walsh family could comprehend. The facility itself was designed for discretion rather than display. Unlike the flashy headquarters of more established aerospace companies, our operation looked like any other light industrial building in the Boulder Tech Corridor. The security was sophisticated, but subtle, and the real innovation happened behind walls that revealed nothing to casual observers. Marcus met me in the parking area, his expression shifting from professional welcome to genuine concern as he studied my face. Rachel, you look like someone who's just made a life-changing decision. I have. Several of them actually. He guided me toward the hangar entrance, past security checkpoints that recognized my biometric data and granted immediate access. Do you want to talk about it? After we're airborne, right now I want to see our aircraft. The hangar doors opened to reveal the culmination of 3 years of innovation and determination. The Horizon 1 was sleeker than any commercial aircraft, its fuselage designed for maximum aerodynamic efficiency at hypersonic speed. The exterior was a deep charcoal gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the wings incorporated adjustments that could modify their configuration based on altitude and speed requirements. She's beautiful, I said, running my hand along the smooth surface of the hull. She's revolutionary, Marcus corrected. Sarah and James have completed all pre-flight checks. Fuel systems are optimized for the transatlantic route, and weather conditions are ideal for testing our maximum cruise speed. Sarah Kim emerged from the aircraft's cabin, her pilot's uniform bearing the subtle, Horizon Aerospace logo we'd designed for eventual commercial operations. She was in her early 40s, with the calm confidence that came from flying everything from fighter jets to experimental prototypes. Dr. Thompson, it's an honor to be conducting the Horizon One's first passenger flight with you aboard. James and I have reviewed all flight protocols, and we're ready to make history today. The honor is mine, Sarah. You and James are taking us into the future of aviation. James Rodriguez appeared moments later, a meticulous man in his late 30s, whose attention to detail had made him legendary among test pilots. Dr. Thompson, we've filed a flight plan for St. Moritz with estimated arrival at 9. Weather conditions are optimal, and we have clearance for our preferred altitude range. Outstanding. How does she handle at maximum cruise speed? Like a dream, James replied with genuine enthusiasm. The propulsion system you designed is smoother than anything I've flown. We'll reach Mach 4 once we achieve optimal altitude, which should put us over the Alps in just under 3 hours total flight time. Marcus handed me a tablet displaying real-time flight data and communication system. You'll have full connectivity throughout the flight, including satellite internet and encrypted communication channels. The cabin is pressurized for comfort at hypersonic speeds, and the inertial dampening system eliminates virtually all sensation of acceleration. As I boarded the aircraft, I was struck by the elegant simplicity of the cabin design. Unlike the ostentatious luxury of traditional private jets, the Horizon One's interior focused on functionality and comfort. The seats were designed for long-duration flights at extreme speeds, with integrated communication systems and workspace areas that could adapt to passenger needs. Dr. Thompson, Sarah said as she completed her final systems check, we're ready for departure whenever you are. I settled into my seat and opened my laptop, pulling up the contact information for the Walsh family's hotel in St. Moritz. It was time to make a reservation. Hotel Alpina, good afternoon, came the Swiss-accented voice of the receptionist. Good afternoon. I'd like to inquire about accommodation availability for tonight. Certainly. May I have your name and the dates you require? Dr. Rachel Thompson. I need a suite beginning this evening, December 28th, extending potentially through January 2nd. One moment please, Dr. Thompson. There was a brief pause as she checked availability. Yes, we have the Alpine Panorama Suite available for those dates. It includes a private terrace with mountain views and full concierge services. Perfect. I'll be arriving this evening via private aircraft. Could you arrange ground transportation from the St. Moritz airfield? Of course. What time should we expect you? I checked the flight estimate on my tablet. Approximately 7 o'clock local time. Excellent. We'll have a car waiting at the airfield. Dr. Thompson, may I ask if you'll be joining the Walsh family party? They mentioned expecting additional guests. The irony was perfect. Actually, I'll be arriving independently, but yes, I believe we'll be crossing paths during my stay. Wonderful. We'll prepare everything for your arrival. As I ended the call, Sarah's voice came through the cabin intercom. Dr. Thompson, we're cleared for takeoff. Please ensure your seatbelt is fastened as we begin our taxi to the runway. Through the small cabin windows, I watched the Denver landscape scroll past as we moved toward the active runway. In the distance, I could see commercial aircraft queuing for departure, each one representing the conventional aviation technology that our aircraft was about to make obsolete. Thompson, James's voice joined Sarah's on the intercom. You're about to experience something unprecedented in civilian aviation. The Horizon One will demonstrate capabilities that exceed anything currently available in private air travel. I'm ready, I replied, and meant it completely. The acceleration was smooth and almost imperceptible, despite the enormous power of our propulsion system. Unlike commercial jets with their noisy engines and obvious strain during takeoff, the Horizon One lifted from the runway with an almost supernatural grace. Within minutes, we were climbing through altitude ranges that most aircraft never approached, reaching optimal cruise altitude, Sarah announced. Engaging hypersonic propulsion in 30 seconds. I felt the slightest shift in the aircraft's movement as we transitioned to hypersonic speed. Then nothing but the subtle hum of advanced engineering operating at peak efficiency. According to my tablet, we were now traveling at speeds that would carry us across the Atlantic Ocean in the time it takes to watch a movie. Marcus had remained on the ground to monitor our flight from the Boulder facility, and his voice came through the communication system with obvious excitement. Rachel, telemetry looks perfect. You're currently at Mach 4, 1 in climbing. How does it feel to be traveling faster than any civilian passenger in aviation history? It feels like vindication, I replied honestly. As we crossed from Colorado airspace into the corridor that would carry us over the northern Atlantic, I opened my laptop and began composing a message that I'd been mentally writing for hours. The email was addressed to Brandon Walsh, with copies to his mother Diane, his siblings Kristen and Tyler, and their respective spouses. The subject line was simple: travel, Brandon and family, I wrote. I wanted to let you know that I've successfully arranged my own transportation to Switzerland, as you suggested. In fact, I'm currently traveling aboard the hypersonic aircraft that I mentioned to you earlier this week, the one you felt should become a Walsh family asset. I paused to check our current position on the flight display. We were somewhere over the Great Lakes, having covered in 20 minutes a distance that would take a commercial jet nearly an hour. I'm sure you'll be interested to know that this aircraft, the Horizon 1, represents 3 years of development work that I completed independently using my own funding and premarital professional connection. It's currently the world's only operational hypersonic civilian aircraft, capable of reducing transatlantic flight time by approximately 70%. Another pause to consider my next words carefully. I expect to arrive at Moritz around 7 o'clock local time, which should be several hours before your commercial flight reaches Zurich. I've taken the liberty of booking a suite at the Hotel Alpina, where I understand you're also staying. I look forward to seeing you when you finally arrive. I reread the message twice, ensuring the tone remained professional despite the circumstances. Then I added a final paragraph. I wanted to thank you for encouraging me to figure it out myself regarding travel arrangement. Your suggestion to respect family decisions has helped me clarify exactly where I stand in relation to the Walsh family, and I appreciate that clarity more than you can imagine. Before I could second-guess myself, I clicked send. The satisfaction was immediate and profound. For the first time in years, I'd responded to the Walsh family's manipulation, not with compliance or argument, but with a demonstration of capabilities they'd never bothered to recognize or respect. My phone buzzed almost immediately with an incoming call from Brandon. I let it go to voicemail, then another call which I also ignored. Within 10 minutes I had 6 missed calls and 3 text messages, all increasingly frantic. The first text read, "Rachel, call me immediately. What are you talking about?" The second, "This is insane. You don't have a hypersonic aircraft. Stop playing games." The third, "If you're really on some kind of experimental plane, you need to land immediately. It's not safe." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I opened my photo application and took a picture of the flight display showing our current speed, altitude, and position over the Atlantic Ocean. The timestamp was clearly visible, along with technical specifications that would be impossible to fake. I sent the photo to Brandon with a simple message. Current status, Mach 4, Q 65,000 feet, approaching European airspace, ETA St. Moritz, 19:00 local time. The response was immediate. "This is impossible. How long have you been planning this?" 3 years, I replied. "The same length of time you've been treating my professional achievements as Walsh family property." My phone rang again, this time showing Diane Walsh's number. I declined the call and switched my phone to airplane mode. Whatever panic was developing within the Walsh family ranks could wait until I was safely on the ground in Switzerland. Sarah's voice came through the intercom again. "Dr. Thompson, we're approaching the midpoint of our flight. Current time to destination is approximately 90 minutes. Would you like an update on our performance metrics? Please, we're exceeding all projected efficiency ratings. Fuel consumption is actually below estimated levels, and our hypersonic cruise speed has been remarkably stable." James and I are both impressed with how smoothly the Horizon 1 handles at these speeds. "Thank you, Sarah. This is exactly what we hoped for during the design phase." As I looked out the small cabin window, I could see the curvature of the Earth more clearly than from any commercial aircraft. We were flying higher and faster than civilian passengers had ever traveled, carried by technology that I'd developed in secret, while the Walsh family dismissed my capabilities as useful hobbies. The irony was profound. Brandon and his family had always seen my technical expertise as something that should serve their business interests, rather than my own professional development. They'd never imagined that I might be developing innovations that exceeded anything they could comprehend, let alone acquire or control. Marcus's voice crackled through the communication system with an update from Boulder. Rachel, we're receiving telemetry that indicates optimal performance across all systems. More importantly, we're also monitoring commercial flight tracking data. Flight 2047 from Denver to Zurich, which I believe was your original itinerary, departed DIA, approximately 30 minutes late due to last-minute passenger changes. According to our monitoring, several passengers were added to the manifest at the last minute, including multiple Walsh family members, who apparently didn't have confirmed reservations. So they'd been scrambling to secure seats after deliberately excluding me from their original travel plan. The image of Brandon, Diane, Kristen and Tyler desperately negotiating with gate agents for last-minute availability was deeply satisfying. Current estimated arrival time for that flight is approximately 0200 to local time tomorrow, Marcus continued. Weather conditions in Zurich may cause additional delays. 7 hours difference. I would be enjoying dinner at a 5-star hotel in St. Moritz, while they were still cramped in coach seats somewhere over the Atlantic, assuming they'd even managed to secure passage. Marcus, once we land and I've had a chance to settle in Switzerland, I want to schedule a conference call with our entire development team. It's time to begin planning the commercial launch of Horizon Aerospace. Already on my calendar, Rachel. This flight is going to change everything for civilian aviation. It's going to change everything for me personally as well. As we approached European airspace, I turned my phone back on to discover 14 missed calls and 27 text messages, all from various Walsh family members. The progression of their communications told a story of growing panic and disbelief. From Kristen, "Mom is freaking out. She says you can't possibly have your own aircraft." From Tyler, "Brandon showed us the photo. Is that really your plan?" From Diane, "Rachel, we need to discuss this immediately. Family assets require family oversight." And from Brandon, a series of increasingly desperate messages. "Rachel, please call me. We need to talk about this. I had no idea you were this far along with the aircraft project. Mother thinks we should explore partnership opportunities. Everyone is very interested in learning more about your technical capabilities. Please don't do anything hasty regarding business decisions." The transformation was remarkable. In the span of 3 hours, I'd gone from being an inconvenient spouse who needed to learn independence to a valued family member whose technical capabilities required immediate attention. I composed a single response to Brandon. "Currently approaching European airspace. Looking forward to our conversation when you arrive in Switzerland tomorrow. I think you'll find I've learned quite a lot about independence." Sarah's voice returned to the intercom as we began our approach to St. Moritz. "Dr. Thompson, we're initiating our descent sequence. Please ensure your seatbelt is fastened as we prepare for landing." Through the cabin window, the Swiss Alps were spectacular in the early evening light, their snow-covered peaks catching the last rays of sunlight. In the distance I could see the lights of St. Moritz beginning to twinkle as the sun set behind the mountains. "Dr. Thompson," James announced, "it's been an honor to pilot the Horizon 1's first passenger flight. You've just experienced the future of luxury travel." "Thank you both," I replied. "This has been everything I hoped it would be." As we touched down at the St. Moritz airfield with the same supernatural smoothness that had characterized our entire flight, I realized that I'd crossed more than just the Atlantic Ocean in under 3 hours. I'd crossed a threshold in my own life, moving from accommodation and compromise to assertion and independence. The Horizon 1 rolled to a stop near a small terminal building where I could see a sleek black car waiting with Hotel Alpina marking. My luggage was efficiently transferred while Sarah and James completed their post-flight procedures. "Dr. Thompson," Marcus said through the communication system, "congratulations on a perfect inaugural flight. The Horizon 1 has exceeded every performance projection." "Thank you, Marcus, and thank you for believing in this project from the beginning. Are you ready to change the world?" I looked out at the Swiss Alps, breathed the crisp mountain air, and felt the weight of 3 years of secret development work finally lifting from my shoulder. I'm ready for whatever comes next. The Hotel Alpina's car glided through the winding mountain roads toward St. Moritz, each turn revealing more spectacular views of the snow-covered peaks that surrounded this exclusive resort destination. My driver, a polite Swiss gentleman named Klaus, maintained a steady conversation about the weather conditions and local attractions, while I absorbed the reality of what I'd just accomplished. "Dr. Thompson," Klaus said as we approached the hotel's entrance, "if I may ask, was that aircraft we collected you from one of the new experimental models? I've been working at the airfield for 20 years and I've never seen anything quite like it." "It's a prototype of sorts," I replied carefully. "Still in the testing phase." "Remarkable." The sound was completely different from conventional jets, much quieter, even at what appeared to be considerable speed during approach. The Hotel Alpina rose before us like something from a fairy tale, its traditional Swiss architecture enhanced by subtle modern touches that spoke of understated luxury. Warm lights glowed from every window, and the entrance was framed by perfectly maintained evergreen trees, dusted with fresh snow. Henry, the concierge I'd spoken with earlier, met me personally at the entrance. He was a distinguished man in his 50s, with the kind of polished professionalism that made Switzerland's hospitality industry legendary. "Dr. Thompson, welcome back to St. Moritz. Your suite is prepared, and I've taken the liberty of arranging dinner reservations at Panorama Restaurant for 8:30. Should you wish to dine with a view of the mountains." "That sounds perfect, Henry. Also, I believe the Walsh family from Boston is staying here as well. They should be arriving sometime tomorrow morning." Henry's expression remained perfectly neutral, but I caught a slight hesitation. "Yes, the Walsh party has accommodations reserved. They were originally expected today, but we received word that their travel plans have been adjusted. How?" "According to their assistant, they encountered difficulties with their original flight arrangements, and have been rescheduled for arrival tomorrow afternoon, rather than this evening. So they hadn't managed to secure seats on their original flight after all." The image of the entire Walsh family arguing with airline representatives at Denver International Airport, while I was soaring over the Atlantic at Mach 4, was deeply satisfying. My suite was magnificent, occupying the corner of the hotel's top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the Engadine Valley. The furnishings combined traditional Swiss craftsmanship with contemporary comfort, and a subtle technology integration allowed me to control everything from lighting to temperature with a tablet interface. I unpacked my luggage systematically, hanging my business attire in the walk-in closet, and setting up my laptop workspace at the suite's executive desk. The time difference meant it was still early afternoon in Colorado, and I wanted to capitalize on the momentum of our successful flight while the achievement was fresh. My first call was to Patricia Hawkins, my attorney in Denver. She answered immediately, her voice carrying an excitement I rarely heard from her usually composed demeanor. "Rachel, Marcus Chen called me an hour ago with the most incredible news," he said. "You successfully completed the first passenger flight of your hypersonic aircraft and are currently in Switzerland. Please tell me this is connected to whatever clarity you were seeking about your marriage." "It's directly connected," I confirmed. "Patricia, I need you to begin preparing comprehensive documentation of my independent ownership of all Horizon Aerospace technologies and related intellectual property. I have a feeling the Walsh family is about to become very interested in partnership opportunities." Already in progress. I anticipated this possibility when Marcus told me about the flight. "Rachel, what exactly happened with your husband's family?" I gave her the complete account of the airport abandonment, their deliberate exclusion from travel arrangements, and Brandon's dismissive attitude toward my independent work. Patricia listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. "This is actually helpful from a legal perspective," she said when I finished. "Their deliberate exclusion and Brandon's explicit statements about learning independence establish a clear pattern of treating you as separate from family decision-making. If they now attempt to claim partnership rights to your technology, we can demonstrate that they can't have it both ways." "What about marital property laws?" could they argue that work completed during our marriage belongs to both of us? Not successful. Colorado law recognizes separate property when it can be demonstrated that assets were developed using premarital expertise, independent funding, and separate business infrastructure. Your Horizon Aerospace documentation shows all three elements clear, and if they attempt to pressure me through threats of divorce. Patricia's tone shifted to something I'd learned to recognize as her courtroom voice. Rachel, based on what you've told me about their financial situation and Brandon's relationship with this Vanessa person, they need you far more than you need them. A competent attorney would advise Brandon that attempting to coerce technology transfer through divorce threats would likely backfire spectacularly, meaning you might end up with a significant portion of their remaining assets while retaining complete ownership of technology worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. After ending the call with Patricia, I contacted Marcus in Boulder to discuss our next steps for Horizon Aerospace. The successful flight had proven our technology beyond any doubt, and it was time to move from development to commercialization. Rachel, I've been fielding calls all afternoon, Marcus said immediately upon answering. Word about today's flight is already spreading through aerospace industry networks. 3 major aircraft manufacturers have contacted me asking about potential licensing agreements. That was faster than I expected. The aviation world isn't that large, and what we accomplished today has never been done in civilian aircraft. Everyone wants to know how we achieved hypersonic speeds with that level of efficiency and passenger comfort. What kind of interest are we talking about? Preliminary discussions suggest licensing deals that could be worth 8 figures annually, with potential for exclusive manufacturing partnerships that go significantly higher. Rachel, if we play this correctly, Horizon Aerospace could become the dominant technology provider for next-generation luxury aviation. Schedule meetings with the 3 most promising contacts for next week. I want to explore our options while maintaining control of our core technology. Already on it. Also, I've prepared a comprehensive technical presentation documenting today's flight performance. The data is remarkable. Rachel. Every system performed above projected specifications. As evening approached, I prepared for dinner with a sense of anticipation. I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since my marriage, I was operating from a position of genuine strength rather than accommodation. The Walsh family's manipulation had inadvertently freed me to demonstrate capabilities they'd never bothered to recognize. The Panorama restaurant was everything Henri had promised, with tables positioned to maximize the spectacular mountain views while maintaining intimate conversation areas. I was seated at a corner table that offered privacy while allowing me to observe the other diners, many of whom were clearly part of St. Moritz's exclusive international community. As I reviewed the evening's menu, selecting wine pairings that would complement the chef's tasting course, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an international number I didn't recognize. When I answered, Brandon's voice came through with a mixture of exhaustion and controlled panic. Rachel, finally. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I turned my phone off during the flight. Hypersonic travel requires certain communication protocols. This isn't funny anymore. We're stuck in Denver because all the European flights are overbooked, and the family is furious about missing their original reservations. I'm sorry to hear that. Have you considered arranging alternative transportation? What alternative transportation? Do you have any idea how difficult it is to find last-minute flights during holiday travel season? The irony was perfect. Actually, I do have some idea. I also have a very clear understanding of how it feels to be excluded from travel arrangements and told to figure things out independently. There was a long pause before Brandon's voice returned, his tone shifting to something I recognized as his business negotiation mode. Rachel, we need to talk seriously about this aircraft situation. Mother thinks there might be opportunities for strategic partnership between your technology and Walsh Resorts luxury travel services. How interesting. This morning, your mother thought I needed to learn independence. Now she's interested in strategic partnership. The family wasn't aware of the scope of your project. If we'd known you were this close to operational capability, the conversation would have been very different. The conversation was exactly what your family intended, Brand. You deliberately excluded me from travel arrangements as punishment for refusing to immediately surrender my technology to Walsh family control. That's not how it happened. That's exactly how it happened. You left me stranded at an airport shuttle stop and told me to figure out my own transportation as a lesson in respecting family decisions. Another pause, longer this time. In the background, I could hear voices that sounded like other Walsh family members discussing something urgently. Mother wants to speak with you directly, Brandon said finally. I'm having dinner. Perhaps we can arrange a conversation when you actually arrive in Switzerland. Rachel, please, we're all stuck at a Denver hotel until tomorrow morning because we couldn't get seats on any European flight. The earliest we can arrive is tomorrow evening. That must be very frustrating. I'm sure the experience will help you appreciate the value of reliable transportation. Are you enjoying this? The question caught me off guard with its directness. Am I enjoying sitting in a 5-star restaurant in St. Moritz after successfully completing the first passenger flight of the world's most advanced civilian aircraft? Yes, Brandon. I'm enjoying it tremendously. I meant, are you enjoying watching us scramble to fix travel arrangements? I'm enjoying the irony of being told to figure things out myself, then doing exactly that more successfully than you imagined possible. Diane Walsh's voice suddenly came through the phone, sharp and imperious. Rachel, this is Diane. We need to discuss your aircraft project immediately. Hello, Diane. How are you enjoying Denver's airport hotels? Don't be childish. This technology represents significant business opportunity that affects the entire family. This technology represents 3 years of work that I completed independently, while your family treated my professional achievements as amusing hobbies. We had no idea you were developing something this significant. If you'd been more transparent about your projects, we could have provided better support. Support like deliberately excluding me from travel arrangements when I refused to immediately hand over my intellectual property. Diane's tone shifted to the authoritative voice she used for boardroom discussions. Rachel, personal feelings aside, we need to approach this situation strategically. Walsh Resorts has the infrastructure and client base to maximize the commercial potential of your technology. And what exactly would you propose as terms for such a strategic partnership? We'll discuss specifics when we arrive tomorrow. But obviously, the technology would need to be integrated into Walsh Resorts' operational structure to ensure proper development and marketing. Integrated meaning controlled by Walsh Resorts management. Integrated meaning leveraged effectively for mutual benefit. I took a sip of the excellent Swiss wine the sommelier had recommended, watching the lights of St. Moritz twinkle against the darkening mountain. Diane, I appreciate your interest in mutual benefit. However, I think you misunderstand the current situation. What do you mean? I mean that your son left me stranded at an airport shuttle stop this morning, telling me to figure out my own transportation and learn to respect family decisions. So I did exactly that. I figured out my own transportation using technology that I own completely, and I learned that I don't need Walsh family approval for my business decisions. Rachel, you're being emotional about what was obviously a miscommunication. I'm being practical about what was obviously a calculated insult. The difference is that I have options you didn't know existed. Brandon's voice returned to the phone. Rachel, please, can we just discuss this rationally when we're all in the same location? Of course, I'll be interested to hear your family's thoughts after you've had time to research hypersonic aviation technology and understand exactly what I've developed. How long have you been working on this without telling us? 3 years. The same length of time you've been treating my expertise as something that should serve Walsh Resorts rather than my own professional development. I ended the call and returned my attention to the exceptional dinner service, enjoying each course while watching the mountain peaks fade into silhouette against the star-filled sky. For the first time in years, I was dining alone by choice rather than because of exclusion, and the difference was profound. As the evening progressed, I received text messages from various Walsh family members, each attempting a different approach to what they clearly perceived as a crisis requiring immediate management. From Kristen, Rachel, Mom is seriously upset. Maybe we could all meet for coffee when we arrive and work this out like adults. From Tyler, impressive aircraft by the way. The family had no idea you were working on something this advanced. Looking forward to hearing more about it. And from Brandon, a series of increasingly conciliatory messages. I'm sorry about this morning. I didn't realize how important the aircraft project was to you. Mother says we should have included you in travel planning from the beginning. Everyone is very interested in learning more about your business capabilities. Please don't make any major decisions about technology partnerships until we can discuss this as a family. The progression was remarkable. In 12 hours, I'd gone from someone who needed to learn independence to someone whose business decisions required family consultation. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Instead, I retired to my suite and spent the evening reviewing technical documentation for Horizon Aerospace, while enjoying the spectacular mountain views from my private terrace. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow dusting the peaks surrounding St. Moritz. I ordered room service breakfast and used the quiet morning hours to continue my business planning, now that the Horizon 1 had proven its capabilities beyond any doubt. Marcus called at 9 o'clock Colorado time, his voice carrying excitement that had only intensified overnight. Rachel, the response to yesterday's flight has been unprecedented. I've received inquiries from aircraft manufacturers in the United States, Europe, and Asia. Everyone wants to understand how we achieved those performance specifications. What kind of specific interest? Gulfstream is asking about exclusive licensing for their next-generation business jet line. Boeing wants to discuss integration possibilities for commercial aviation. And there's a consortium of European manufacturers offering partnership terms that would make Horizon Aerospace the primary technology provider for hypersonic civilian transport. Timeline for decisions: they're all pushing for meetings within the next 2 weeks. The aviation industry moves slowly except when it encounters genuine breakthrough technology. Then everyone wants to move immediately. Schedule preliminary discussions with all serious inquiries. I want to understand our full range of options before committing to any specific direction. Already working on it. Rachel, there's something else. I've been monitoring financial news, and there are some interesting developments regarding Walsh Resorts. What kind of development? Their stock price dropped 3% yesterday after rumors began circulating about financial irregularities in their expansion projects. Nothing confirmed, but several industry analysts are questioning their debt-to-equity ratio. This was news to me, though it aligned with my observations of their increasing cost consciousness and delayed vendor payments. Are we talking about serious financial problems? Potential. Real estate development is capital intensive, and if they've been leveraging aggressively for expansion, any reduction in cash flow could create serious problems. Interesting timing. Very interesting, especially considering their sudden interest in your technology asset. After ending the call with Marcus, I spent the morning exploring St. Moritz, taking advantage of the crisp winter weather to walk through the town's elegant shopping district and along the frozen lake that gave the resort its distinctive character. The physical activity helped me process the dramatic changes that had occurred in less than 24 hours. By noon, I felt ready to face whatever conversation awaited when the Walsh family finally arrived in Switzerland. I returned to the hotel and confirmed with Henry that their party was expected around 6 o'clock, assuming their rescheduled flights departed Denver on time. Dr. Thompson, Henry said as I passed through the lobby, I hope you don't mind my mentioning that your arrival yesterday has generated some interest among our other guests. Word travels quickly in Moritz about unusual aircraft, and several people have inquired about the hypersonic jet that brought you here. What kind of inquiries? Mostly curiosity about the technology and whether it represents a new luxury travel option. Moritz attracts many guests who are interested in exclusive experiences and cutting-edge innovations. I appreciate the discretion in your responses. Naturally. However, I should mention that 3 guests have specifically asked whether they might arrange similar transportation for their own travel needs. This was an unexpected development. Commercial inquiries, preliminary interest. Wealthy individuals who travel frequently between continents and are always seeking more efficient options. Please take their contact information. I may be able to provide more details about future availability. As the afternoon progressed, I received regular updates from Marcus about the growing industry interest in our technology, along with increasingly frantic messages from the Walsh family as they navigated delayed flights and international travel complications. Brandon's latest message read, "Flight delayed again, won't arrive until 8 p.m. Mother wants to schedule dinner meeting immediately upon arrival." I responded simply, I'll be available when you're ready to talk. At 7 o'clock I was enjoying aperitifs in the hotel's piano bar when Henry approached my table with his characteristic diplomatic smile. Dr. Thompson, the Walsh party has arrived and is currently checking in. Mr. Walsh has asked whether you might be available for a brief conversation this evening. Please let them know I'm in the piano bar when they're ready. 20 minutes later, Brandon appeared in the doorway, scanning the room until he spotted me at my corner table. He looked exhausted from 36 hours of travel complications, his usually pristine appearance slightly disheveled. When he approached my table, his expression carried a mixture of relief, frustration, and something I'd never seen before, genuine uncertainty. "Rachel," he said, settling into the chair across from me, "thank you for agreeing to meet tonight. You look tired, Brandon. How was your extended stay in Denver?" "Challenging, very challenging." He signaled the waitress for a drink before continuing. "We need to talk about what happened yesterday." "Which part? The part where you left me stranded at an airport shuttle stop, or the part where I arrived in Switzerland before you despite having no advance notice of travel arrangements?" "Both, I suppose." Brandon's drink arrived, and he took a substantial sip before meeting my eyes. "Rachel, I owe you an apology. The family made some incorrect assumptions about your project development, and we handled the travel situation poorly." "Incorrect assumptions such as assuming your aircraft work was still in early development phases rather than operational capability. And if you'd known I had operational hypersonic aircraft technology, would you have left me stranded at the airport?" Brandon had the grace to look embarrassed. "No, obviously not." "So the apology is for underestimating my capabilities, not for the deliberate cruelty of abandoning your wife as punishment for refusing to surrender my intellectual property." "It wasn't meant as punishment." "What was it meant as, Brand?" He stared into his drink for several moments before responding. "It was meant to demonstrate that family decisions take precedence over individual preferences." "And how did that work out for you?" "Not well. Obvious." I leaned back in my chair, studying my husband's face in the soft lighting of the piano bar. "Brandon, in 6 years of marriage, have you ever known me to bluff about technical capabilities?" "No." "Have you ever known me to exaggerate my professional achievements?" "No." "Then why did you assume I was overstating the significance of my aircraft project?" Brandon's expression shifted to something approaching honesty. "Because if you really had developed technology that advanced, it would change everything about our business planning and family financial structure." And that possibility was threatening to the Walsh family's sense of control? Yes. It was the first completely honest answer he'd given me in months. "Brandon, where does that leave us now?" "Mother wants to discuss partnership opportunities. She thinks Horizon Aerospace could complement Walsh Resort's luxury travel services." "And what do you think?" Brandon finished his drink and signaled for another before answering. "I think my wife just demonstrated capabilities that none of us understood, using resources we didn't know existed, to accomplish something we thought was impossible. And I think our marriage is probably in serious trouble." The honesty was unexpected, and in its way, refreshing. "Why do you think our marriage is in trouble?" "Because I've spent 3 years treating your professional work as a hobby that should serve our family business interests." "And because you've apparently spent 3 years developing technology that makes you completely independent of anything the Walsh family can offer." I considered his words carefully. "Those are accurate observations. Rachel, can I ask you something directly?" "Please." "If the roles were reversed, if I had left you stranded somewhere, and dismissed your achievements the way we dismissed yours, would you forgive me?" I thought about the question seriously, appreciating that he was finally engaging with the reality of our situation rather than attempting to manage or manipulate it. "I don't know, Brand. But I know that forgiveness would require understanding why it happened, and confidence that it wouldn't happen again." "And do you have that confidence?" "Not yet." Brandon nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. "Mother wants to meet with you tomorrow morning to discuss business opportunities." "And what do you want?" "I want to understand how I managed to be married to someone for 6 years without recognizing who she really was." For the first time since our conversation began, I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. "That's a good question, Brandon. I'd like to understand that too." We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, listening to the piano player work through a collection of jazz standards, while other hotel guests conversed quietly at nearby tables. Finally, Brandon spoke again. Rachel, regardless of what happens with our marriage, I want you to know that what you accomplished yesterday was extraordinary. The family should have recognized your achievements years ago. Thank you. Can I ask how long you've been planning to prove us wrong this dramatically? I wasn't planning to prove you wrong. I was planning to build something meaningful with my expertise and resources. Proving you wrong was just a convenient side effect. Brandon actually smiled at that, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him since his arrival. Will you meet with Mother tomorrow? Yes. But Brandon, you should know that I'm not interested in partnerships that involve surrendering control of my technology or my business decisions. I'll make sure she understands, and you should also know that I've been contacted by multiple aircraft manufacturers who are interested in licensing agreements. Walsh Resorts isn't my only option for commercialization. I figured as much. Brandon stood up, straightening his jacket with the automatic gesture of someone accustomed to maintaining appearances. Rachel, whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad you're safe. When I realized you were actually flying in an experimental aircraft, I was terrified something might happen to you. The Horizon 1 has undergone extensive testing. It's safer than most commercial jets. I'm sure it is. But that doesn't mean I wasn't worried. After Brandon left to rejoin his family, I remained in the piano bar for another hour, processing the conversation and considering what tomorrow's meeting with Diane Walsh might bring. For the first time in our marriage, Brandon had approached me as an equal rather than someone whose decisions required family approval. Whether that represented genuine change or temporary adaptation to circumstances remained to be seen. As I returned to my suite, I reflected on how dramatically the balance of power had shifted in less than 48 hours. Yesterday morning, I'd been a Walsh family wife, whose professional achievements were treated as entertaining diversion. Tonight I was the owner of revolutionary technology that could reshape the luxury aviation industry, with options and resources that made me completely independent of Walsh family approval. The view from my terrace was spectacular under the clear mountain sky, with stars reflecting off the snow-covered peaks that surrounded St. Moritz. Somewhere in those mountains, the Walsh family was probably conducting urgent strategy sessions about how to handle the unexpected complication of my actual capabilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult conversation, but for the first time in years, I would be entering those discussions from a position of strength, rather than accommodation. The future, like the mountain views surrounding this exclusive resort, was full of possibilities I was only beginning to explore. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the hotel's private conference room, a space designed for discreet business discussions among St. Moritz's influential international client. I arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather portfolio containing technical specifications, patent documentation, and preliminary commercial proposals that had been prepared by Marcus and my legal team overnight. Diane Walsh was already seated at the polished conference table, her silver hair immaculately styled despite the travel chaos of the previous day. She wore a charcoal business suit that conveyed authority while maintaining the understated elegance that was her trademark. Brandon sat beside her, looking more rested than he had the evening before, while Kristen and Tyler flanked them with tablets and documents spread across the table. Rachel, Diane said, rising to greet me with the kind of formal warmth reserved for important business associates. Thank you for making time for this discussion. I understand congratulations are in order for your remarkable technological achievement. Thank you, Diane. I appreciate your interest in learning more about Horizon Aerospace. Henri had arranged for coffee service and a selection of Swiss pastries, creating an atmosphere of civilized negotiation rather than family confrontation. As I settled into my chair across from the Walsh delegation, I noticed how they'd positioned themselves as a unified business entity rather than the family members I'd known for 6 years. Rachel, Diane began, opening a folder thick with documents. We've spent considerable time researching hypersonic aviation technology since learning about your project. The commercial potential is extraordinary. I'm glad you've had the opportunity to understand the scope of the innovation. More than understand it, Tyler interjected, his tone carrying the enthusiasm he typically reserved for profitable real estate acquisitions. "We see tremendous synergy between your technology and Walsh Resort's luxury travel infrastructure." Kristen leaned forward, her marketing expertise evident in her presentation style. "Imagine offering our clients the ability to travel from New York to our Swiss properties in under 3 hours, or from Los Angeles to Jackson Hole in 90 minutes. It would revolutionize the entire luxury hospitality experience." "Those are certainly interesting applications," I replied carefully. Diane retrieved a bound presentation from her folder, sliding it across the table toward me. "We've prepared some preliminary partnership concepts that we believe would maximize the commercial potential of your technology while leveraging Walsh Resort's established client relationships and operational infrastructure." I opened the presentation to find detailed financial projections, organizational charts, and strategic plans that assumed integration of Horizon Aerospace into Walsh Resort's corporate structure. The depth of analysis was impressive, representing far more work than could have been completed overnight. "This is quite comprehensive," I said, turning through pages of market analysis and revenue projections. "How long have you been developing these concepts?" The question caught them off guard. Brandon shifted uncomfortably while Diane's expression remained carefully neutral. "We've always been interested in innovative transportation solutions for our hospitality services," Diane said diplomatically. "These projections assume specific technical capabilities and operational parameters that you wouldn't have known about until yesterday. Some of this analysis appears to be based on proprietary information that I haven't shared publicly." Tyler cleared his throat. "We have extensive connections in the aerospace industry. When word began circulating about your flight yesterday, we were able to gather some general technical assessments." "Word began circulating among whom specifically?" The silence that followed was telling. Kristen finally spoke up. "Rachel, the aviation industry isn't that large. News of a successful hypersonic passenger flight spreads quickly among people who follow these developments. And these people shared detailed performance specifications with Walsh Resorts, based on what kind of relation?" Brandon's voice carried a defensive edge when he responded, "Rachel, we're not trying to steal your information. We're trying to understand the business opportunity well enough to propose meaningful partnership terms." I closed the presentation and placed it deliberately on the table. "Let me ask this directly. Did anyone in this room contact aerospace industry sources, claiming family relationship or business affiliation with me in order to obtain technical information about the Horizon?" The uncomfortable glances exchanged around the table provided the answer before anyone spoke. "Rachel," Diane said carefully, "as your family, we naturally have interests in understanding developments that could affect all of us. Any inquiries made were in the spirit of comprehensive business planning. So that's a yes with appropriate context," Kristen added quickly. I opened my own portfolio and removed a document prepared by Patricia Hawkins. "This is a legal analysis of intellectual property ownership regarding all Horizon Aerospace technologies. It confirms that I own complete and exclusive rights to every patent, design specification, and operational protocol related to hypersonic aircraft development." Diane's expression sharpened with interest. "Of course, no one is questioning your ownership of the technology. What exactly are you questioning?" "We're questioning whether individual ownership is the most effective structure for maximizing commercial success and family benefit." "Family benefit meaning Walsh family benefit." "Rachel," Brandon said, his tone shifting to something that resembled his earlier honesty, "you're technically family. Your success benefits all of us, just as our success benefits you. Except that my success was developed independently using my own resources and expertise, while your success has been built on family assets and shared investment." Tyler leaned back in his chair, his expression carrying the kind of calculated patience I'd seen him use during property negotiations. "Rachel, let's approach this pragmatically. You have revolutionary technology but limited infrastructure for commercial implementation. We have established client relationships and operational capabilities, but no access to next-generation transportation technology. Partnership makes sense for both parties. What specific partnership terms are you proposing?" Diane smiled with the confidence of someone accustomed to successful negotiations. "We're proposing that Horizon Aerospace become a wholly owned subsidiary of Walsh Resorts, with you maintaining technical oversight while benefiting from our business development and marketing infrastructure." "A wholly owned subsidiary," With very generous compensation arrangements and complete autonomy over technical decisions, Kristen added quickly, but with Walsh Resorts controlling commercial strategy, client relationships and revenue distribution. With Walsh Resorts providing comprehensive business support that allows you to focus on what you do best, Diane corrected. I had expected this approach. It was the same pattern they'd used throughout our marriage, acknowledging my technical capabilities, while assuming control over strategic decisions and commercial benefits. What happens if I'm not interested in subsidiary arrangements? The question created another uncomfortable silence. Finally, Brandon spoke. Rachel, we hope you'll consider the advantages of working together rather than independently. That sounds like a veiled threat. It's not a threat, Diane said firmly. It's a realistic assessment of market conditions. The aerospace industry favors established players with proven track records and substantial resources. Independent operators face significant challenges in commercial implementation. Are you suggesting that Walsh Resorts would actively oppose my efforts to commercialize Horizon Aerospace independently? We're suggesting that cooperation produces better outcomes than competition, Tyler replied. I removed another document from my portfolio, this one bearing the letterhead of 3 major aircraft manufacturers. These are preliminary licensing inquiries I received yesterday from Gulfstream, Boeing, and Airbus Consortium. All 3 companies are interested in exclusive licensing agreements for my hypersonic technology. The impact was immediate. Diane's composed expression faltered slightly, while Brandon and his siblings exchanged glances that suggested they hadn't anticipated this level of industry interest. Exclusive licensing, Kristen repeated carefully. Exclusive licensing with guaranteed minimum royalty payments in the 8-figure range annually, plus percentage participation in all related revenue streams. Those are preliminary inquiries, Tyler said dismissive. Actual contract negotiations would involve extensive technical validation and financial due diligence. Which brings me to my next point. I produced a tablet displaying real-time flight tracking data. The Horizon 1 is currently en route to London for meetings with European consortium representatives. Flight time from St. Moritz to London, 53 minutes. The silence stretched uncomfortably as they absorbed the implication. Not only did I have operational hypersonic technology, but I was actively demonstrating its capabilities to their potential competitors, while they sat in a Swiss conference room, making subsidiary proposals. You sent your aircraft to London without telling, Brandon asked, his voice carrying a mixture of surprise and something that might have been admiration. I sent my aircraft to London because I have business meetings that don't require Walsh family approval. Diane recovered her composure quickly, shifting to a more direct approach. Rachel, let's discuss this honestly. Walsh Resorts has significant financial obligations related to our expansion projects. Your technology could provide revenue streams that would benefit everyone involved. Meaning Walsh Resorts needs my technology more than I need Walsh Resorts' infrastructure. Meaning we could all benefit from strategic cooperation. And if I prefer to pursue independent commercialization, Diane's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. That would be unfortunate for our ongoing family relationships. There it was, the explicit threat I'd been expecting. Cooperation or consequences. Diane, are you suggesting that my relationship with your son depends on my willingness to surrender commercial control of my technology? I'm suggesting that marriage involves mutual consideration of family interests. The same family interest that led to my deliberate exclusion from travel arrangements 2 days ago. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. Rachel, that was a misunderstanding that we've apologized for. It was a calculated demonstration of power that backfired spectacularly, and now you're attempting the same approach on a larger scale. I stood up, gathering my documents with deliberate care. I want to thank you all for clarifying the Walsh family's position regarding my independence and my business assets. Rachel, wait, Kristen said quickly. We don't have to approach this as an adversarial situation. You're absolutely right. We don't have to approach this adversarial, but you're choosing to do exactly that, by demanding control over technology you didn't develop, using resources you didn't provide, based on expertise you don't possess. We're trying to find mutually beneficial arrangements, Tyler protested. You're trying to appropriate my life's work the same way you've appropriated every other contribution I've made to Walsh family interests over the past 6 years. Diane's tone shifted to the authoritative voice she used for final negotiation. Rachel, you're being emotional about what should be a straightforward business discussion. I'm being realistic about what is obviously an attempted takeover disguised as family cooperation. If you walk away from this discussion, you'll be choosing to operate independently of Walsh family support and resources. That's exactly what I'm choosing, Diane. The same independence your son told me to learn when he left me stranded at an airport shuttle stop. I moved toward the conference room door, then paused to deliver my final point. You should know that I've scheduled meetings with multiple aircraft manufacturers, 2 venture capital firms, and a consortium of international investors over the next week. All of them are interested in partnerships that recognize my ownership and control of Horizon Aerospace Technologies. Rachel, Brandon said, standing as well, please don't make irreversible decisions based on family misunderstanding. I'm making strategic business decisions based on family behavior that has been remarkably consistent for 6 years. As I reached the door, Diane played her final card. Rachel, if you proceed independently, you should understand that Walsh Resorts will be pursuing our own aerospace technology initiatives. Competition in this industry can be quite challenging. I turned back to face her directly. Diane, if Walsh Resorts attempts to interfere with my business operations or appropriate my intellectual property, you'll discover that I'm far better prepared for that challenge than you might expect. What does that mean? It means I've spent 3 years developing technology that makes your family's resources irrelevant to my success. And I've spent 6 years documenting every instance of your family's attempts to control and diminish my professional achievements. The threat was subtle but clear. They could attempt business interference, but I had both the resources and the documentation to respond decisively. I left the conference room and walked directly to the hotel's business center, where I'd arranged secure communication with Marcus and Patricia for immediate strategy session. The Walsh family's response had been even more aggressive than I'd anticipated, confirming that their interest was purely exploitative rather than collaborative. Marcus answered my call immediately, his voice carrying excitement about the London meeting. Rachel, the European consortium response has been extraordinary. They're prepared to discuss exclusive licensing agreements that would make Horizon Aerospace the primary technology provider for next-generation luxury aviation across multiple continents. Timeline: they want to finalize preliminary agreements within the next 10 days. The London demonstration flight convinced them that our technology is ready for immediate commercial implementation. And the financial terms, significantly better than anything the American manufacturers have proposed. We're talking about licensing fees, plus equity participation, that could make you one of the wealthiest technology entrepreneurs in the aerospace industry. Marcus, I need you to accelerate all negotiation timelines. I want signed agreements with our preferred partners before the end of the week. That's aggressive, even for technology this revolutionary. Is there something driving the urgency? The Walsh family just attempted to demand control of Horizon Aerospace as a condition of maintaining family relationship. They've also threatened business interference if I proceed independently. Are they serious about interference? Serious enough that I want legal protection in place before they can develop whatever strategy they're planning. I'll contact all potential partners immediately and explain that we're moving to expedited negotiations due to competitive pressures. Most companies understand that revolutionary technology attracts aggressive acquisition attempts. My call with Patricia was equally productive. She'd been monitoring the morning's developments through secure communication channels I'd established before the meeting. Rachel, I recorded the entire conference room conversation through the audio system you activated before entering the meeting. Every threat and attempted coercion is documented. Legal implications: if they attempt business interference or intellectual property challenges, we have clear evidence of their motivations and methods. More importantly, their explicit threats regarding your marriage provide strong grounds for divorce proceedings that would protect all your assets. Divorce proceeding. Rachel, Diane Walsh just told you that your relationship with your husband depends on surrendering control of your business assets. That constitutes coercion and possibly extortion. No court would award them marital property rights under those circumstances. The afternoon proceeded with a series of productive business calls while I avoided contact with the Walsh family, who had apparently retreated to their own suites for strategy discussions. Henry discreetly informed me that they'd requested meeting rooms and privacy for the remainder of the day. At 4 o'clock, I received an unexpected visitor. Brandon knocked on my suite door, alone this time, his expression carrying a weariness that went beyond travel fatigue. "Rachel, can we talk privately? Not about business partnerships or family strategy, just about us." I invited him in, curious about what approach he might take without his family's support and guidance. "I want to apologize," he began, settling into one of the suite's comfortable chairs. "Not for this morning's meeting, which was Mother's approach, but for the past 6 years of our marriage." That's a comprehensive apology. It needs to be comprehensive, because the problems have been comprehensive. Brandon looked out at the mountain views before continuing. "Rachel, I've been thinking about your question yesterday, about how I managed to be married to someone for 6 years without recognizing who she really was. And what conclusion did you reach?" "I think I did recognize who you were. I think I chose to ignore it, because acknowledging your capabilities would have required acknowledging that I contributed very little to our relationship beyond family connections and shared lifestyle." The honesty was unexpected, and in its way, more painful than the business threats had been. "Brandon, why are you telling me this now?" "Because this morning, I watched my family attempt to steal your life's work, and I realized that I've been participating in the same pattern on a smaller scale for our entire marriage. Participating, taking credit for your ideas, dismissing your achievements, treating your expertise as something that should serve our family interests rather than your professional development." Brandon met my eyes directly. "I've been treating you like a resource rather than a partner." "Yes, you have. And now you've demonstrated that you never needed our resources or approval to achieve extraordinary success." "No, I never did." Brandon stood up and walked to the terrace doors, looking out at the snow-covered peak. "Rachel, if you filed for divorce tomorrow, what would happen to Horizon Aerospace?" "Nothing. It would remain completely under my control as separate property developed using independent resources." "And what would happen to Walsh Resorts?" "I don't know. That would depend on your family's financial situation and business strategies. Mother thinks your technology could save our expansion projects. Some of our recent investments haven't performed as expected, and the luxury travel market is more competitive than we anticipated." This was the first direct acknowledgement of the financial pressures I'd suspected. "How serious are the problems?" "Serious enough that losing access to revolutionary transportation technology could force us to scale back our growth plans significantly. And serious enough that your family is willing to threaten our marriage to gain control of that technology." "Yes." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 6 years of accumulated disappointments and missed opportunities filling the space between us. "Brandon, what do you want from this conversation?" "I want to understand whether there's any possibility of saving our marriage without destroying your independence." "What would that look like?" "I don't know. I've never been married to someone who didn't need anything I could provide." "I've never needed anything you could provide, Brandon. I needed things you could choose to give. Respect, support, recognition, partnership. You chose to provide lifestyle and status instead. And now you don't need lifestyle or status from the Walsh family." "Now I don't need anything from the Walsh family." Brandon returned to his chair, his expression carrying a sadness that seemed genuine. "Rachel, do you think it's possible for people to change fundamental relationship patterns?" "I think it's possible for people to want to change. Whether they can actually do it depends on their willingness to give up the advantages that made the old patterns appealing." "What advantages would I have to give up?" "The advantage of being married to someone whose achievements enhance your status without threatening your ego. The advantage of having access to technical expertise without acknowledging professional equality. The advantage of family loyalty that prioritizes Walsh interests over individual integrity. Those are significant advantages." "Yes, they are. And our marriage has been structured to provide them to you, while convincing me that I was receiving equal benefits." Brandon was quiet for a long time, processing the implications of what I'd said. Finally, he spoke again. "Rachel, if I were willing to give up those advantages, Would you be willing to consider rebuilding our relationship on different terms? What different terms? Terms that recognize your independence and success rather than trying to control or diminish them. Terms that treat Horizon Aerospace as your achievement rather than a family asset. And how would your family react to those terms? Probably not well. Are you prepared to prioritize our marriage over your family's business interests? I don't know. I've never had to make that choice before. Brandon, that choice has been implicit in every major decision we've made as a couple. You've consistently chosen family business interests over our relationship. You're right. So the question is whether you're capable of making different choices, not whether you're willing to consider them. Brandon stood up again, his restless energy evident in his inability to remain seated during difficult conversation. Rachel, what would happen if I chose to support your independence completely, even if it meant opposing my family's attempts to control your business? I don't know. We've never tried that approach. Would you be willing to try it? I considered the question carefully, studying Brandon's face for signs of the manipulation I'd learned to recognize over 6 years of marriage. Instead, I saw exhaustion, genuine uncertainty, and what might have been the beginning of actual self-awareness. Brandon, I'm willing to see what happens if you consistently choose our relationship over your family's control strategies, but I'm not willing to compromise my business independence or professional integrity while we figure that out. I understand. I'm not willing to tolerate any family interference with Horizon Aerospace operations or attempts to pressure me through threats about our marriage. What if I can't prevent family interference? Then you'll need to decide whether you're married to me or to Walsh family business interests. Brandon nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. Rachel, regardless of what happens between us, I want you to know that what you've accomplished is extraordinary. You deserved recognition and support from your family, and I'm sorry you didn't receive them. Thank you. Can I ask you something? Of course. When you were developing the Horizon 1, did you ever imagine using it to prove us wrong this dramatically? No, Brand. I imagined using it to prove myself right. Proving you wrong was just a necessary side effect. After Brandon left, I stood on my suite's terrace watching the lights of St. Moritz begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as I continued negotiations with potential partners, while managing whatever strategy the Walsh family developed in response to my refusal to surrender control of my technology. The Horizon 1 had returned from London with confirmations that European interest in licensing agreements was even stronger than Marcus had projected. Within a week I would likely have international contracts that would make Walsh family approval irrelevant to my success. The question was whether Brandon was capable of the fundamental changes he claimed to want, or whether 6 years of ingrained patterns would ultimately prove stronger than his expressed desire for a different kind of relationship. Either way, I was no longer the stranded wife waiting for rescue at an airport shuttle stop. I was Dr. Rachel Thompson, owner of revolutionary technology that was reshaping the future of luxury aviation, with options and resources that made me completely independent of anyone's approval or control. The transformation was complete, and there was no going back. 3 days later, I stood in the Horizon Aerospace conference room in Boulder, surrounded by contracts that would reshape the future of luxury aviation. The European consortium had moved faster than anyone anticipated, finalizing licensing agreements that guaranteed Horizon Aerospace exclusive partnerships across multiple continents. Marcus spread the final documents across the polished table, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who had just negotiated deals that would change an entire industry. The numbers are extraordinary, Rachel, Marcus said, pointing to revenue projections that exceeded our most optimistic estimate. Between the European licensing fees, the Asian manufacturing partnerships, and the North American distribution agreements, Horizon Aerospace will generate more revenue in its first year than most aerospace companies achieve in a decade. And complete operational control remains with us. Complete control. They're licensing our technology, not acquiring our company. You maintain ownership of all patents, design specifications and future developments. Patricia Hawkins entered the conference room carrying additional documentation from our legal team. Rachel, I have updates on several fronts. First, the Walsh family's attorneys contacted me yesterday, requesting information about potential partnership opportunities with Horizon Aerospace. What kind of partnership opportunity? The same subsidiary arrangement they proposed in Switzerland, with slightly better financial terms. I declined to provide any technical specifications or operational details. Second item, Brandon filed a formal request for marriage counseling through a Denver family therapy practice. He's asking whether you'd be willing to participate in mediated discussions about your relationship. This development surprised me. What did you tell them? That any personal decisions would be made independently of business negotiations, and that Horizon Aerospace operations wouldn't be subject to marital property discussions regardless of counseling outcomes. Marcus looked up from the contracts with interest. Are you considering counseling? I'm considering whether Brandon is capable of the changes he claims to want. Professional mediation might provide clarity about that. And if he's not capable of those changes, then I'll proceed with divorce while maintaining complete control of my business assets. Patricia smiled with the confidence of someone who had structured legal protections to withstand any challenge. Either way, your position is secure. The documentation we've prepared makes it impossible for anyone to claim partnership rights to technology developed using your independent resources and expertise. Third item, Walsh Resorts announced yesterday that they're exploring strategic partnerships with transportation technology companies to enhance their luxury travel services. Their stock price recovered slightly on the news, but industry analysts are questioning whether they have the capital for major technology acquisitions, so they're trying to create the impression that they have alternatives to Horizon Aerospace, while simultaneously approaching us for partnership discussions. It's a common negotiation tactic, but not particularly effective when the other party holds all the leverage. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, the Walsh family had treated my professional work as an interesting hobby that might occasionally benefit their business operation. Now they were publicly claiming interest in aerospace technology partnerships while privately begging for access to innovations they'd never bothered to understand or respect. My phone buzzed with a text message from Brandon. Rachel, I know you're busy with business meetings, but I'm flying back to Denver this afternoon. Would you be willing to meet for dinner tonight? Just the two of us, no family. No business pressure. I showed the message to Marcus and Patricia, both of whom had become advisors on more than just technical and legal matters over the past week. What's your instinct? Patricia asked. My instinct is that Brandon is finally realizing the full scope of what he's lost, both personally and financially. And that matters to you? It matters that he's recognizing the reality of our situation. Whether it matters enough to rebuild our relationship depends on what he's actually prepared to change. Marcus packed the signed contracts into a secure case that would be delivered to our international partners within hours. Rachel, whatever you decide about your marriage, these agreements guarantee that your technology and your company remain completely independent. No one can touch what you've built. Thank you both for everything. Thank you for creating something extraordinary and having the courage to protect it from people who would have diminished its value. I agreed to meet Brandon for dinner at a quiet restaurant in downtown Denver, choosing a location that offered privacy without the formality of hotel dining rooms or the casual atmosphere that might minimize the seriousness of our conversation. When I arrived at Bistro Vendôme, Brandon was already seated at a corner table, studying the wine list with the kind of careful attention he typically reserved for important business decisions. He stood when he saw me approach, his expression carrying a nervousness I'd never seen before. Throughout our marriage, Brandon had always projected the easy confidence that came from knowing his position was secure, and his options were extensive. Tonight, he looked like someone who understood that his choices had consequences he couldn't control or manipulate. Rachel, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I'm here because you asked to meet without family interference or business pressure. I'm curious what that conversation looks like. Brandon waited for me to sit before returning to his own chair, a gesture of courtesy that seemed more genuine than the automatic manners he'd been taught by his upbringing. I've spent the last 3 days thinking about everything that's happened since Switzerland. What conclusions did you reach? That I've been married to an extraordinary woman for 6 years while consistently treating her as ordinary, and that I've lost any right to expect forgiveness or reconciliation. The admission was more direct than I'd expected. Brandon, what changed your perspective? Watching my family attempt to steal your life's work made me realize that I've been participating in the same theft on a smaller scale throughout our entire relationship. The only difference was that I convinced myself it was normal marriage compromise rather than systematic diminishment. And now I understand that you never needed to compromise anything. You had the capabilities and resources to achieve extraordinary success independently. I just prevented you from being recognized for it. The server approached to take our order, providing a brief interruption that allowed me to process Brandon's words. He seemed genuinely committed to honest self-assessment rather than strategic manipulation, but 6 years of experience had taught me to be cautious about accepting surface sincerity. Brandon, assuming you're being honest about recognizing these patterns, what are you prepared to do differently? I'm prepared to support your independence completely, even when it conflicts with Walsh family interests. I'm prepared to acknowledge your achievements publicly rather than allowing family members to diminish or appropriate them. And I'm prepared to rebuild our relationship as equals rather than maintaining the power imbalance that's defined our marriage. Those are significant commitments. They're commitments I should have made 6 years ago. What about your family's reaction to those commitments? Brandon's expression hardened with a resolve I'd never seen before. My family's reaction is their problem. I've spent 34 years prioritizing Walsh family approval over my own integrity, and it's cost me the most important relationship in my life. Are you prepared for the possibility that they'll withdraw financial support or exclude you from business operations? Rachel, you've just signed contracts that will make you wealthier than the entire Walsh family within 2 years. If I'm lucky enough that you're willing to rebuild our marriage, I won't need Walsh family financial support. The honesty was striking, but it also revealed something troubling. Brandon, are you interested in rebuilding our relationship because you love me, or because my success provides an alternative to family dependence? The question caught him off guard, and he spent several moments considering his response before speaking. That's a fair question, and I'm not sure I can answer it in a way that separates those motivations clearly. Try. I've loved you since the day we met, but I've also been attracted to what you could provide in terms of status, lifestyle, and professional capability. For 6 years, I convinced myself those things were compatible rather than recognizing that using you for what you could provide was inconsistent with loving you for who you are. And now I'm terrified that I've permanently damaged the only relationship that's ever mattered to me because I was too selfish and insecure to appreciate what I had. The server returned with our entrees, but neither of us seemed particularly interested in eating. The conversation we were having felt more important than maintaining social conventions about dinner etiquette. Brandon, if we were to attempt marriage counseling, what would you hope to achieve? I'd hope to understand how to be married to someone whose success and independence I celebrate rather than trying to control or diminish. I'd hope to learn how to contribute to our relationship in ways that add value rather than taking value from your achievement. And if counseling revealed that you're not capable of those changes, then I'd accept that our marriage can't be salvaged, and I'd support whatever decisions you make about our future. Including divorce? Including divorce? With whatever financial arrangements you consider fair. What financial arrangements would you consider fair? Brandon set down his fork and looked directly at me. You keep everything related to Horizon Aerospace and any other business assets you've developed independently. I take responsibility for Walsh family obligations without expecting you to contribute resources or expertise. We divide only the assets that were genuinely joint acquisitions. That would leave you significantly less wealthy than you've been accustomed to being. Rachel, I've spent 6 years being wealthy because I was married to someone whose capabilities I exploited while pretending we were equal partners. If that wealth was based on a lie, then I don't deserve to keep it. The response surprised me with its directness and apparent sincerity. Have you discussed these financial arrangements with your family? No, and I'm not going to. This conversation is between you and me, not between you and the Walsh family business interests. How do you think they'll react when they realize you're not negotiating on their behalf? Probably with anger and accusations that I'm betraying family loyalty. But their reaction will confirm that I'm finally making the right choice. We spent the remainder of dinner discussing practical questions about marriage counseling, including scheduling and the selection of a therapist who specialized in relationships complicated by significant wealth and professional achievement disparity. Brandon seemed genuinely committed to the process, though I remained cautious about accepting his expressed willingness to change fundamental relationship patterns. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Brandon asked a question that revealed the depth of his concern about our future. Rachel, do you think it's possible for us to rebuild trust after 6 years of broken promises and missed opportunities? I think it's possible to build new trust based on new behavior. Whether that's enough to sustain a marriage depends on whether we discover that we actually like each other as equals rather than as the unbalanced partnership we've maintained. And if we discover that then we'll have clarity about ending our marriage respectfully rather than continuing patterns that diminish both of us. 2 weeks later, I sat in Sarah Chen's office for our fourth marriage counseling session, watching Brandon struggle to articulate his feelings about my growing international recognition as a technology entrepreneur. The European licensing agreements had generated significant media attention, with aviation industry publications featuring Horizon Aerospace as the company revolutionizing luxury travel. Several interviews had mentioned my marriage to Brandon Walsh, but only in passing, as context for my Colorado residence rather than as a defining characteristic of my identity. Brandon, Dr. Chen said gently, you seem uncomfortable with the way Rachel's success is being Can you help us understand what's troubling you? It's not that I'm uncomfortable with her success, Brandon replied carefully. It's that I'm uncomfortable with feeling irrelevant to that success. Can you elaborate on that feeling? For 6 years, I've defined my value in our relationship partly through what I could provide in terms of family connections, social status, and financial resources. Now Rachel has achieved recognition and wealth that exceed anything I could offer, and I'm struggling to understand what I contribute to our partnership. Dr. Chen turned to me. Rachel, how do you respond to Brandon's concern about contribution and relevance? I think Brandon is still approaching our relationship as a transaction, where each person provides value to the other, rather than as a partnership where we support each other's individual growth and achievements. What would a support-based partnership look like to you? It would look like celebrating each other's successes without needing to claim credit or control. It would look like contributing to each other's goals without expecting those contributions to define our individual worth. It would look like being proud of each other, rather than competitive with each other. Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Rachel, I want to be proud of your achievements without feeling diminished by them. But I'm not sure I know how to do that. What makes you feel diminished? The knowledge that you never needed anything I thought I was providing. The realization that our entire relationship has been based on my misunderstanding of your capabilities and independence. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Brandon, is it possible that Rachel did need things you were providing, but that those things weren't status or financial resources? What do you mean? What might she have needed that had nothing to do with what you could provide and everything to do with who you are as a person? Brandon considered the question seriously. Companionship, emotional support, partnership, and building a life together. Rachel, is that accurate? Partially. I needed companionship and emotional support, but I also needed respect for my independence and recognition of my capability. Brandon provided companionship while systematically undermining my professional identity. And now he's working to provide recognition and respect, but I'm not sure he's capable of maintaining that approach when it conflicts with his family's interests or his own insecurities. Dr. Chen addressed both of us. It sounds like you're both concerned about sustainable change versus temporary accommodation to circumstances. Is that accurate? We both nod. Brandon, what evidence could you provide Rachel that your support for her independence would continue even if external pressures encouraged you to return to previous patterns? I'm not sure. That's the problem. Everything I say sounds like promises, and I've broken promises before. Rachel, what would you need to see to believe that Brandon's changes are sustainable? Consistent behavior over time, particularly when supporting my independence costs him something he values, and evidence that he's developed genuine appreciation for my achievements rather than strategic accommodation to circumstances he can't control. What would that evidence look like? Active celebration of my success rather than passive acceptance, defending my independence when others challenge it, even when those others are his family members, contributing to my goals because he wants to see me succeed, not because he wants to maintain our relationship. Dr. Chen made notes while we spoke, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific incidents from our marriage or current concerns about our future. The process was illuminating in ways I hadn't expected, revealing not just the problems in our relationship, but also the fundamental differences in how we approached partnership and mutual support. As our session ended, Chen provided homework assignments designed to help us practice new interaction patterns. For Brandon, the assignment was to identify 3 specific ways he could actively support my business goals without expecting recognition or benefit. For me, the assignment was to communicate clearly about my needs and boundaries rather than assuming Brandon should intuitively understand them. One final question for both of you, Dr. Chen said as we prepared to leave. If you discovered that rebuilding your marriage required giving up things that have been important to your individual identities, would you be willing to make those sacrifices? Brandon answered first, yes, if it meant building something honest and sustainable. Rach, I'm willing to sacrifice things that have been important to my identity as Brandon's wife. I'm not willing to sacrifice things that are important to my identity as Dr. Rachel Thompson. That's a crucial distinction, Dr. Chen observed, and one that will be important to explore as you continue this process. 6 months later, the Horizon 1 touched down at Denver International Airport, carrying me home from a successful tour of Asian manufacturing facilities, where our international partners were preparing to scale production of hypersonic civilian aircraft. As we taxied toward the private aviation terminal, I could see Brandon waiting near the arrival area, his expression carrying the kind of genuine excitement I'd learned to distinguish from performed enthusiasm. The transformation in our relationship had been gradual but consistent. Brandon had systematically demonstrated his commitment to supporting my independence, even when doing so required him to oppose his family's attempts to influence my business decisions. He'd celebrated each milestone in Horizon Aerospace's growth without attempting to claim partial credit, and he'd defended my achievements when others questioned my capabilities or suggested that my success was somehow diminished by my marriage to a wealthy family. Most importantly, he'd begun developing his own professional identity separate from Walsh Family Enterprises, accepting a position with a Denver-based renewable energy company, where his skills were valued independently of his family connection. The work challenged him in ways that Walsh family management roles never had, and his growing confidence in his own capabilities had eliminated much of the insecurity that had driven his need to control or diminish my achievements. Dr. Thompson, he said as I emerged from the aircraft, using the formal address that had become his way of acknowledging my professional accomplishments in public settings. How did the Asian facilities inspection go? Extraordinarily well. Production capacity will exceed our projections by 30%. And quality control standards are exceptional, outstanding, Marcus called this morning with updates on the South American licensing discussion. Apparently, 3 additional countries want to discuss exclusive regional partnerships. We drove home through Denver traffic while I reviewed business updates, and Brandon shared news about his own work developing sustainable energy solutions for luxury resort property. The conversation was easy and natural, representing the kind of partnership we'd never achieved during the first 6 years of our marriage. Rachel, Brandon said as we pulled into our driveway, I have something to tell you that you're going to find interesting. Good interesting or problematic interesting? Definitely good. My mother called yesterday to ask whether I thought you might be willing to consult on a Walsh Resorts transportation efficiency project. Consult how? As an independent contractor at market rates, with complete control over technical decisions and implementation strategies. The request represented a complete reversal from the Walsh family's attempts to appropriate my technology 8 months earlier. What changed their perspective? Reality. Their expansion projects have struggled without access to innovative transportation solutions, while your technology has revolutionized luxury travel for every other hospitality company that's licensed. And they think I'd be interested in helping them after everything that happened. They think you might be interested in demonstrating that independent success is more valuable than family control. What did you tell them? I told them that Dr. Rachel Thompson makes her own business decisions, and that any inquiries should be directed to your office rather than through family channels. Perfect response. I'm learning. That evening, As we sat on our terrace watching the sunset paint the Rocky Mountains in shades of gold and purple, I reflected on the extraordinary changes that had occurred since that morning when Brandon left me stranded at an airport shuttle. The deliberate cruelty that was meant to teach me dependence had instead revealed capabilities that made me completely independent. The humiliation that was designed to reduce my options had actually expanded them beyond anything I'd previously imagined. "Brandon," I said, pouring wine from a bottle we'd been saving for special occasions, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't left me at the airport that morning? I think about it frequently. If we'd traveled to Switzerland together as originally planned, I would have continued taking your capabilities for granted while your family continued dismissing your achievements. And Horizon Aerospace would probably have remained a secret project that I never truly understood or appreciated. Do you regret the way things unfolded?" Brandon considered the question seriously, as he'd learned to do with all important discussions. "I regret the cruelty and the years of missed opportunity, but I don't regret that we eventually found our way to honest partnership. Even though it required you to give up the advantages you'd enjoyed for 6 years, Rachel, those advantages were based on diminishing someone I love in order to feel better about myself. Giving them up didn't cost me anything valuable. It freed me to discover what I'm actually capable of when I'm not focused on controlling someone else's capability." As darkness settled over Denver and the city lights began to twinkle below us, I felt a satisfaction that went far beyond professional success or personal vindication. The woman who had been abandoned at an airport shuttle stop had transformed into someone whose achievements were reshaping an entire industry. The marriage that had been built on inequality and accommodation had become a partnership based on mutual respect and individual strength. The Horizon One had carried me across oceans and continents, but the most important journey had been the one that carried me from accommodation to independence, from diminishment to recognition, from being someone's appendage to being completely unapologetically myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.